What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode here of the BlockHash Podcast, your number one resource for all that is happening across the emerging tech space. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. Today, I'm joined by another amazing individual, Tad Nelson. He's the founder of Tad Nelson and Associates, and he is a lawyer in Texas, focusing on a number of different areas. And we're going to talk to him today in particular about crises in businesses, how businesses and their owners can protect themselves, what some of those things kind of look like, and provide some value from this side in this front from a legal sense. So, Tad, welcome to the show, man. It's a pleasure to have you on today. How you doing?
It's great to be here. Yeah, good to be here. Glad to see you.
Awesome. Pleasure's all mine. To get things underway, I'm sure people would love to learn a bit more about yourself. If you don't mind, telling us a bit about your backstory, what kind of led you into law itself. Was there any initial inspiration as well? And then, into your speciality as well within the law field. What was kind of your origin story?
Sure. My name's Tad Nelson. I grew up in Galveston, Texas, which is a little island just south of Houston. And my dad was a longshoreman, which people that don't know what that is, that's a person that works on the waterfront. And it seems like when I was young, my dad was always, pissed off at somebody and always in some kind of litigation. And, I was his oldest son, and it was always, hey, you need to be a lawyer. You need to be a lawyer. By the age 13, I didn't want to be a baseball player. I didn't want to be a doctor. All I had heard it was be a lawyer. So I went off and kind of became a lawyer. So but when I came out of law school, I wasn't really sure I wanted to litigate or anything like that. I didn't want to get into personal injury. And I started a tax LLM. I was big into numbers. I was always kind of a mathlete. And I was getting an LLM, which is a master's in tax law at University of Houston. And I was working in a probate firm, one of the best probate firms in Houston. And to be honest with you, I was losing my mind. I was bored out of my skin. And a good friend of the family was the elected DA down in Galveston. He always said I could have a job. And I was like, I'm never going to be a criminal lawyer. And then the next thing I knew, I was calling him one day saying, Mike, his name's Mike Reno. He's a legend down here. And I was like, I'm losing my mind, man. I got to get out of here. I can't sit at a desk all day. I need to be in the courtroom. 2 weeks later, I was an assistant DA. And, I've loved it ever since. That was in 94. And I don't know what else I'd do. It's kind of a good fit for me. I do family law as well. I work in South Houston, kind of right between. I'm about 25 miles from Galveston, 25 miles from Houston. Kind of dominate those two, not my practice. And, we do criminal and family and, federal cases, state cases. Kind of just, I've been in love with it for, 35 years. I can't imagine doing anything else. I literally am one of those people that they go, what I'm good at and what I do for a living are kind of the same thing. So I'm kind of blessed.
What are some of the verticals that you focus on for you guys, yourself, as well as the rest of you at the law offices of Tad Nelson? What type of cases, what type of clients usually that you represent? You touched on it a little bit there, family, personal stuff. But what does it kind of like encompass in total that you guys focus on?
And we have the gamut. We have all kinds, but mostly I'm up here in League City and Friendswood. These are two suburbs of Houston, fairly affluent. So it ends up I have a lot of DWI cases. I do a lot of high net value divorce. It seems like a lot of kids, a lot of young people, and that's like every other affluent area. The kids are getting in trouble. They have access to too much stuff, too much money, too much access. And, they're always screwing stuff up. My job is to, make sure they can go to college, that kind of thing. And and I'll tell you the other thing that seems like it's in the affluent. And I do a lot of this is, the computer crimes, the sexual computer crimes, the kiddie porns, the stuff of that, the sexual assaults. It seems like that's in the affluent communities. I really don't do that much. I'll fall into kids with marijuana, but I really don't do any of the big federal drug cases. I mean, I bump into them once or twice a year, but that's not my bread and butter. I'm not a gang lawyer. I don't really represent a lot of gangbangers, although occasionally I do. But mostly my people are just people with, affluent people, educated people, kids that are going to go to college. and those kind of families. It's where I live. It's kind of where my home is. I stray from that, but that's by and large what I have.
Gotcha. So pretty well encompassing a lot of different areas of focus, clients and cases that come in. Do you work with a lot of businesses and business owners as well on different situations?
Well, yeah. It's funny because we're down here in the South, especially lately. Uh, I'm I'm consulting for so many businesses that are dealing with immigration issues right now, and then the immigration issues always seem to bleed into your criminal issues, and then they bleed into some family law issues when you have one of the people that is married is an illegal immigrant and one's a citizen, and they're going to divorce, and then there's problems there with keeping them, especially now with the administration in power now. There's all kinds of problems with that. Everybody's running scared down here, so we're kind of dealing with those issues. So yeah, it's all over the place.
Interesting. I imagine a lot of those areas kind of overlap too, like some of the familial stuff, personal stuff, overlap into, creating risk for businesses from a legal perspective as well, like the immigration stuff too. So I imagine a lot of these things, like you mentioned, bleed into other areas that eventually tie into that.
Absolutely, and that's what my direct contact with so many businesses these days is so many employment issues where they do have the immigrants, and they're worried about what is their liability if they have 6 or 7 illegal immigrants on staff. What are they going to do, especially in the restaurant business down here? Everybody's scared. Where is it going to splash on them? And I understand. I mean, because we really can't give them a great answer. The easy answer is, well, try to stay within paint inside the lines for a while till we get this thing figured out.
Absolutely. And I speak to a lot of businesses, and a lot of things that they revert back to me are their concerns around, reputation and financial health of their business. And the fact that a legal crisis can kind of come from out of nowhere. It's not always something that's prompted, like, hey, you're going to have to deal with something in a month. Like, it could happen tomorrow. Someone could slip and fall, or, you get a divorce and maybe that causes a rift in the business, or maybe you have immigrants that are hired underneath you, or so many different possibilities that could upend what you're doing and cause a lot of issues. I hear about them all the time too. And I'm curious, some of these legal areas of risk maybe that you've dealt with or that you've heard of, that, you see business owners facing, quite often today. Like, are there any that, kind of stand out, or that are kind of frequent, I guess, with clients that maybe come to you?
When you're dealing with professionals, whenever they get, charged with anything, and mostly most professionals aren't criminal per se, but getting a DWI is in fact a crime. But DWI is different than any other crime. I mean, it's a good person 9 out of 10 times who just used some poor judgment. But you'd be shocked, especially the ones that are. I have a lot of. I mean, I live here on the water. I'm looking across the water when I open these windows, and I can see NASA. So uh, I have a lot of clients that have worked at NASA, and the bottom line is some of them have the highest clearance in the land. Anything they get is problematic. And then you deal with some of the bigger crimes, like the possession of child porn or things of that nature. They're run out of there in a second. So you see it from that perspective. Also, we have a lot of defense contractors around here. This is where we really have had some issues. You represent a big enough defense contractor, somebody in the higher ups or in upper management or ownership gets charged with any crime. That's going to affect their ability to do, hundreds of $1 million worth of, work with the government. That affects their contract. So we've had to deal with that. And when it comes down to it, I think that the most obvious thing is whenever somebody, is dealing with somebody charged with a crime, it's just easier these days to walk. You know what I mean? And that's what's gotten scary. Nobody gets a second chance. Nobody gets a second look. Nobody really takes a step back and evaluates it for what it is. Everybody's worried about perception. And I get it. Perception, is reality. I don't know that it's fair. And I don't know that we're in the same place we were. I'm 60 years. I just turned 60. I don't know we're in the same place we were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. and it makes business tougher. I mean, business is clearly tougher today than it was 20 years ago. Now we're all making more money. I get it because, especially the ones that have figured it out. But at the end of the day, it's still tougher, and you don't have the good relationships. I look back 20 years ago and just think of the relationships. Nowadays, things seem a lot more superficial than they used to be. I mean, things seem more real 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I was probably like 10 or 9 years old 20 years ago, but I can understand that. I think that, it's more difficult today for sure, but it's also more complex. I mean, you talk about the level of oversight today and the internet, and you talk about the level of exposure and reach that you get, as a small business, even locally. And then you talk about regulation. You talk about, if you're working for the government, maybe, you're under a contract for certain things you can't talk about, or you have to be careful what you say or what you do, or, that may bleed into other work that you do as well. It's just, there's so many moving parts today. It's not as simple as here's your license, go do, your business and generate revenue and pay your taxes. Like, it should be that simple. But there's so many moving parts today. It's like, you could mess one thing up and get in trouble and have a fine here, or have to go to court over this, or get in a lawsuit for that. It's a nightmare, especially in America where it's highly litigious. This is a lawyer. I live in Colombia, and it's the complete opposite. It's not very litigious, which highlights it even more for America, I think, in my opinion. But no, it's very complex today, and as a business owner, it drives you mad, probably.
Oh, absolutely. And again, the levels of responsibility. I mean, as the CEO or the president, or you one of your underlings can make a mistake that it can be so devastating to you personally, you know, because of litigation and things like that. Yeah, there's just so many levels of it where it seemed like back in the day, things were done more with a handshake and like, hey, we're going to get through this together. We're all rowing the same boat. No, none of us are in the same boat anymore.
With that in mind, like, here's the money question. If, it's so difficult today, it's so complex today, how can a business owner, an executive, a founder, the business itself protect itself today? Like, is there like a step by step process that maybe you work with people on to help them, keep an eye on these things and manage things properly and assess risk and legal issues when they do arise? Like, is there a blueprint to that? Or is it like a real case by case basis?
It's a case by case basis in a lot of ways, but also, I mean, it is a formula. There is a recipe, you know, and you just kind of stay with it the whole time. For example, in my business, and I think I'm a small law shop. I do family and criminal law. It's not like a restaurant where people are going to, in theory, keep coming every Friday or have lunch there twice a week. Mine is, you do a good job for this person, and then they'll tell others, and occasionally they get, occasionally there's some recidivism, but not that often. Um, so you've got to kind of look at it different than like a store that sells goods, or a restaurant or something like. But the most important thing, this is how we're all the same. Every business, and you know this. I mean, every business is about relationships with your clients or your customers. And, whatever it is, you have to make them happy. A restaurant that serves a bad meal, they're not going to be perfect, but it's how you handle it, how you get through it, and what have you. Like with me as a criminal lawyer, I mean, you know, every criminal I have in, it's not their fault. People in today's society, and I know you've got to realize this, nobody takes responsibility for anything. So if I represent all these people who are being charged with crimes by the government, nobody wants to accept any responsibility. So it's, hey, Tad, fix this. I can't fix everything. I can add my light to the sum of light and bust my ass. But at the end of the day, much like a restaurant that serves a shitty meal, as long as you take your number one priority is customer service, you know, not so much, as much as I want to get them the great, finality, I want to get them that super disposition, take care of their case. Just as important is walking, you know, hand in hand with them during the process, because it's the process that kills them. They need to be informed. They need to feel like you're fighting for them. They need to know you're there. So, talking with, about all the tech stuff that you guys like to talk about, we've gone through so many redundancies, to make sure that the client is touched at every process. We've got software that literally will show them in the pipeline, and as it moves from one section to the next, they get an email about it and say, "Hey, you can go to your portal, and you can see the different films we have and the different videos we posted to let you know what's coming next, to let you know what's expected. We even have a video about where to park when you go to court the first time, because we want them to feel like we're holding their hand. That's what they need. You know, I can't change what they did. I can change a little bit of what I'm going to get them, but it's always close. But what I can change is the experience, and I can change for them, you know, how dark the situation is. I can add a little light to a dark situation, and I can make it tolerable. And so that's where, once you realize that, as a lawyer, yeah, I've been doing this 35 years. I opened my doors June 1st of 91. So how many, 91? Yeah, I'm right at 34 years. So, and it takes a long time before you realize that you might be a lawyer, but lawyering is not your business, you know? And once you realize that, you actually can become a better lawyer when you realize it's not just about your skills as a lawyer.
Another thing I want to ask is like, do you have any cases maybe that you can talk about? You don't have to mention any specific names or companies, but I'm curious, like, if you have any good examples of this that you've kind of worked with and held their hands and kind of given them the guidance they need to figure all these things out, and kind of what that has looked like. So I imagine there will be business owners that will watch this and be very curious as to like what those processes kind of look like in terms of how you guys approach preparing a business, preparing an owner, like getting them like mentally, um, prepared for those scenarios and like, how to adapt to them.
Well, and I will give you one on each side, because we've had them where they've gone south, you know, and a lot of those times, and then we've had them where they turned out great. And let's take one that went south. This just was recently. So you have a person that literally, is running a business, a family business. Uh, Things start getting tough, with the finances. Ultimately, this person goes through probably 4 or 5 years without, he had 30 something employees, not paying the employee tax. you know, then the federal government gets in this. This is a bad situation. Well, what you can do, in this situation, just trying to help. So it was only a matter of time before somebody in this situation is going to the penitentiary, right? So, what you can do is work with the government, try to get as much time as you can, allow this guy to put back the family business back as much as he can get, get it to the next generation, and allow for a transition before this person has to go to the penitentiary. There's those kind of things that we can do, and granted, it's not going to change the stay in the pen, but it does change the overall health of the family, you know and then there's other times where we have things that just you just work and you just work. You turn over, you look under every stone. You turn over everything. You look at the case law. You figure out what you can, and you fight. If you never stop fighting, any day that you go, the analogy I always make, it's I go to court every day. Let's just say I carry 10 files. I'm going to get what I want on two of them. Well, I take those, just like the kid back in the day when we were playing ball with our friends. We didn't get what we want. We took our ball. We went home. So I take those files back to the office and I bring them back another day. Try to get, the next time I go, get two more that I like. And ultimately, if you just keep working it, you'll occasionally get these things where you get people's cases dismissed. And there's nothing more rewarding when you save somebody's life, especially when you save somebody's life that does run a business, or they had a business crime, they had something going on. I've had some people in the tech industry, where there were some issues with selling products that, you know, some forged products that were coming from China that said they were IBM, and then, things like that. And you just see the outreach of this stuff. It's when you start dealing with things that are shipped overseas and then spread out through the country, you don't realize how many people are touched by just one little thing. And so there's some rewarding issues like that.
Do you help business owners as well when it comes to stuff like doing research on some of these things, like looking into, everything from permitting to trademarks and IP? Some of these things are like really hard to do, especially in the US, where everyone has 1,000 versions of the same name, or maybe a big company has a patent on something that nobody really knows about until you try to create something, and then they sue you, or there's all these different situations that can be, again, a headache for a founder or small business that's trying to grow, or a business that's expanding incredibly rapidly, and you can't manage all these different things. Like, do you help kind of like also research some of these things they need to do and help them figure out also from a legal perspective what they need to do at the federal level, what they need to do at the state level? Okay.
We do it all the time, and here's how we do it. Like my shop is mainly criminal, and although I do some other things, really, I've been in this community. I literally live to this day 15 miles from where I was born. I've never gone far other than for school, so I've been here for everybody, forever. Know everybody. So ultimately, when they come to me, what I do a lot of times is I will, we'll go find the best. Like if we're going to deal with somebody in IT, an IT lawyer, we'll go find the best in Houston. We'll bring them in, and then we put them on the team, and they're the brains of the operation. I'm kind of the guy, stroking the fire and making sure everything goes the right way and protecting the client. We do that all the time, especially with all the federal statutes out there, and they're getting more and more confusing. And there's another round of confusion right now coming with all the AI that we're having to start to get, and that's really changed things. It's got everybody sitting back in their seat wondering, which way is this going to go? I think everybody's starting to get a feel for it now. It's been long enough, 2 or 3 years, but that's kind of changed things.
Have you guys gotten any cases in regards to AI as of yet, whether it's from an individual or a business perspective? I know there's a lot of concern about it when it comes to impersonation, when it comes to ripping off IP potentially, or issues with customer data, data leaks. Like, there's so many different things that potentially could come out of this. Have you guys seen anything kind of as of yet, or do you imagine that you'll see more cases like that in the future?
I do think I'm going to see more, but I will tell you the one that I have seen is, and I had a lawyer who literally submitted some briefs that were wrong, that the AI was wrong. And then that's one thing, that's shame on him. Where this lawyer made a huge mistake is like a lot of people, when they're called to the carpet, they lie. And then once you lie about it, then the problem really, it starts to snowball. And I'm representing this lawyer who's a great lawyer, just panicked and made a mistake, lied to a courthouse. And, we're looking at some disbarment issues possibly, or at least some kind of suspension. And that's the problem with AI. It's going to be great, and it is great, but if you don't use it right, or you rely on it when you shouldn't, we got to work the kinks out. I'm sure anybody that's, any one of your listeners or your viewers is going to know that it's just not an automatic.
Yeah, yet is the key word. That's another question I want to ask you that I think would be very interesting is, because I think with AI proliferating into so many different industries and verticals, and AI agents kind of on the forefront coming here to specialize in those different fields, I imagine that there will definitely be one in the legal field. Like, do you guys imagine, in the future, Tad Nelson maybe having an AI component that maybe could help with studying case law, or assessing cases, or helping clients, or kind of work like in an assistant role alongside what you guys do? Because I imagine it could be something really, really beneficial in terms of amplifying what lawyers already do, what attorneys already do. But have you guys explored that, or is it like still too early? Have you pondered it? I'm just kind of curious.
We're all using AI in my office. There's very, very seldom a day that I don't, for example, we do a lot of DWI. So I'll get, when there's a blood case, I get, I don't know, uh, 500 pages back from the lab. And I've got some training. I've got a master's in forensic toxicology, and I'm designated a lawyer scientist by the American Chemical Society because I do these kind of scientific cases. Well, I used to go through that. It'd take me 12 to 14 hours to go through this packet. I run that stuff through chat these days and ask it for any anomalies. I mean, that's to me like 30 seconds. It's shocking. And then, I go back and check it out, what it tells me to look at, but it puts me in such a better position in just a fraction of the time. I'm using, it's helping me write briefs. I go back and check the sites. So of course, obviously when I prepare something, I run it through chat, make sure the verbiage is good and what have you. And I'll ask it for any, do you have any ideas to make this better? Or should I, what am I not clear on? And it comes back really well. I use it in all advertising. When I blogs, that I run a blog through two programs. I run it through the first program to help me write it. Once I come up with my idea, then I take it to a second program to make sure it matches decent SEO and that it doesn't look too AI-ish. That's what the game is these days. Is using AI, but at the same time we're using other AI to make it look like it's not AI, so we don't get clipped there. I've got AI responding, to some of my social media stuff when there's a comment, especially when it's a pretty plain vanilla or a pretty negative comment. I have it just go answer it. If somebody asks a legitimate question or something real, which is about 1 out of 50. I try to go back and answer that person, but so much of the nonsense, you can just, hand to AI and just everything runs smoother. So, I mean, it's integrated. Now, I don't know that my firm is is the same as most people, especially that's led by a 60-year-old. I think most are a little bit behind us, but the younger people, man, they're doing it this way. I mean, this is the future. This is what's happening. And, if you're not using AI, if you're not, the big things right now, if you're in a firm, you're not using AI, you're not on social media, you're just missing opportunities.
Do you think that AI at some point would be able to represent a client in court on behalf of the firm? Or do you think that's like a long ways off?
I don't see it in my lifetime. Granted, I'm 60, but maybe your lifetime, I mean, I don't see how, but again, if we'd have been having this conversation 5-6 years ago, we wouldn't have seen how AI was doing what it's doing now. So, who knows? I mean, anything's possible. I still think I'm in one of the few professions that you really have to be a human being. I don't know how I could be replaced. Like this conversation, I don't know how two AI bots could do this. Maybe they could someday.
It's my biggest fear. I'll be out of business.
It could be as interesting as us, or I don't. I mean, maybe we'll see it.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's a good question. 2.5 years ago, we didn't even have ChatGPT, and it went from putting 6, 7, 8 fingers on people and making people look silly to now being able to, actually perform alongside of a doctor or a lawyer or work in these advanced professions. Who knows what it does in another 2.5 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line in our lifetime. But I do think it's very fascinating that you guys do leverage it and that it can be such a helpful component too. And the amount of time it saves, the efficiency it creates, the exponential growth on accuracy and precision as well. We're all human beings and we forget things or miss things, or, it's a really good way to like proofread and clean up. And, I think it'll only actually make what you guys do even better and more effective. I don't think it's going to be something that's going to replace a lot of jobs or a lot of professions in general, maybe some, but I think for the most part, it's just going to be something that, better amplifies a business or a firm or a profession. So it'll be interesting to see what that does, down the line.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Kind of reeling back here to businesses, I'm curious, since you work in Texas, what the landscape kind of looks like. And again, I've talked to all kinds of different businesses from all over the place, domestically and internationally in the U.S. You see terrible choke points in places like New York and California, and businesses hemorrhage money and have all kinds of issues, and it's impossible to run a business and to do anything. And I know other states are very favorable. Where does Texas kind of stand amongst the states that are out there in terms of being favorable to do business and to navigate rules from a state level and to operate and the protections that it has? Is it a good place to do business? Like, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the one thing, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. I mean, Texas is open for business. I mean, Abbott, Dan Patrick, they are both so pro business. So, you can't, and, I don't see eye to eye with them on all their politics. But the one thing you can't argue about Texas, and that's why California is moving to Texas. That's why they aren't moving to Florida. I mean, they're just, big businesses coming here. You've got, Tesla's here, Dell's here. We've got big business up in in the Austin area. I mean, Texas is really open for business. Very favorable state, especially compared to some of the, like California, New York. I mean, it's off the chain. I mean, you know, there's plate, there's land here. There is, places in the big cities. You've got the big cities. You've got, the highway system run up and down. I mean, everything you need for business is here. We got the people.
What would you say is the best city to do business? I've heard a lot of good things about Austin. I visited a number of times. I've also heard a lot of good things about Dallas as of lately. If someone was starting a business and coming to Texas or moving it to Texas, where would you suggest they go? Is there any?
Well, I think all the big cities are great. The ones you hit on, I'm just short of Houston's great. I mean, a great place to do business. Austin is fabulous. Austin's one of the coolest places in the country. And that's the problem with Austin. Everybody wants to be there. Austin is the one city, it seems like, that can be as expensive as California. I mean, there's only so much waterfront. You're out on the lake, or you're, in a couple of the nicer little areas of Austin can get really expensive. But Austin's great. I mean, it's beautiful. It's got the hills, it's got water, got the horns. We got it all. Dallas is another great place to do another great place to do business, and it's open. I mean, and out of all three of those, and then you got San Antonio, which isn't bad. I'm just not a huge San Antonio fan, but Austin's the one you're still dealing with some legislation inside the city. Although the Teslas, right now, just in the last couple of weeks, are having the self-drive taxis right now in Austin. That's where they're running their little experiment. And I've got a couple friends up there, and I've been following it pretty closely. And to be honest with you, I expected it to be a fiasco, but 3 weeks in, it's going really smooth. Is what I'm hearing. So yeah, that's going to be a game changer. But all three of those, Austin, Dallas, Houston, all of them big time open for business. I mean, you could open a business in any of the three, and just have opportunity upon opportunity. The one thing about Texas, whatever you do, as long as you're good at it, you're going to be supported here. That's the one thing you can say about Texas. There's enough people looking for everything, that if you can provide some kind of service or product and you're decent at it, you're going to get your opportunity.
That's awesome. No, that's really great to hear. What advice would you give to a business owner that they could apply today to better help them protect their business, prepare their business, for any kind of legal crisis in the future?
It goes back to what we were talking about, redundancies. Always, the one thing I learned early is one of my bosses, it takes 50% of the time to do the first 90% of the work. It takes another 50% to do that last 10. And that last 10% of the work is what takes you from, really good at your craft to amazing at your craft. And if you can get your mind around that, about, anybody can be good at anything, but to be great, you really have to make an effort. And, I would want to start people with that. Let them know, just realize it takes an effort. And then my second thing to tell people is re- your customers, your clients, whatever you call them, they're gold, and treat them like gold. Um, the one book I will tell, I don't really, I read a lot, but the one book I think every business person needs to read is Unreasonable Hospitality. And it is a book about literally taking care of everything for people and give them the experience, no matter what profession you're in, whatever the good experience is for that profession, do it better than that. One louder. And if you can do it one louder, I mean, that's gold. I mean, that, and again, as we talk about, tech and AI, what's the only thing that AI can't do? Can't kiss a client's ass. Can't make them feel great about themselves. I guess, you could type out some words, say, you really look good today, Mr. Nelson. Well, nobody's going to buy that. But you can really make your client feel good. You can give them a rewarding experience. And if you can do that, you know, you separated yourself from everybody else. And, that's what business is. Once you realize, so many people think like if they're in like the law business that that lawyering is your business. No, lawyering is your product, but it's not your business. My lawyering skills are no different than selling basketballs at Dick's Sporting Goods. And once you grasp that, you know, it makes your process easier. You know, we're all in the same business, which is making money, and I mean, that's what business means. And the way you make money is satisfied customers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hospitality is everything. And it relates to any business. It doesn't matter if you're selling cars or running a restaurant or in a profession like you're like in the legal profession like yourself, or you work in the medical profession, or you're a podcaster. I got to have good conversations. I got to be prepared for those. You got to be prepared for court cases and to help your clients. It doesn't matter what it is. It's definitely very important. So that's a good piece of advice. And the book too. What was it called? Unreasonable Hospitality?
Unreasonable Hospitality.
Okay. Awesome. I'll check that one out as well. I like to read, so I need something else for my reading list. But no, that's awesome. And what is on the horizon for you guys this year with Tad Nelson? Do you guys have any plans to grow or expand from here? Any new verticals you guys want to take on, or are you just kind of treading along and perfecting your craft as you go?
No, well, actually, we've been on a big push. We're bringing in a few more lawyers. We're in the process of doing plans on a new office right across from the courthouse in Galveston. Our office right now is right at, like I said, halfway between Houston and Galveston. I'm from Galveston. Like I said, we're going to build an office right across the street from the courthouse. Going to be more active down there. Hire some more lawyers. Open up a couple more. What we're going to do more probate, do more personal injury. Bring in some different things to do. Just serve more needs. As we've been growing, you start building out, looking for other cash flows. All the things you have to do to grow a business.
Awesome. Do you attend any events or conferences or engagements kind of like that, and talk about any of this kind of stuff?
Well, that changed my practice a couple years ago. I got with a group called SMB, and a couple really, really smart guys that work with lawyers. Get some coaching, get a fractional CEO or a COO, and brought that into the office, and really started changing from being, just some lawyers doing a bunch of legal work to a business. And that's, we've always been fairly successful in the sense of providing legal services. But I got to tell you, only in the last couple of years have we really looked at it from a business perspective, as far as growing it, as far as um, thinking of what the numbers are, KPIs. What are we trying to accomplish? Why are we advertising on Facebook? What is that doing for me? Am I just two and a half, 3 years ago, I wouldn't have known any of those numbers. Now, I've got a dashboard up on the screen. I know every number like that. And what's funny, like I said, I'm 60 years old. I mean, I wish I'd have known this stuff at age 40. The sky's the limit. I mean, once you realize whatever you're doing, you realize it's a business. And I've got a business degree. I went to UT. until you utilize it, you kind of think, well, I kind of understand business and I'm a pretty decent lawyer and I can do this, that, and the other thing. But until you really look at it like as a business and make every decision like it's a business decision, and evaluate everything from that perspective, what's going out, what's coming in, until you're doing that, you know, you're never going to run it like a business. You're never going to be able to grow it like a business. And the whole business deal. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Are you going to be at any events or conferences this year? Any engagements maybe coming up in the second half of this year, or what's your plan? And where people maybe meet up with you?
Well, I mean, I'm doing this. The one I go to is SMB, and they're quarterly, and I've been the last 6. Yeah, no, we're going to be. I think it's the end of September in San Antonio. That's where the next one is. We just got back from the one in Chicago, and it's a 3-day event. It's you're talking to your coaches and your executives, and you're working on strategies and worried about your KPIs and your budget. I mean, stuff that you would have never thought of. That's integral, especially to a small business. Maybe even more so than a big business. Because I mean, a small business can get so lost in the numbers, by just running the business. Hey, bottom line is, I go out to dinner 3 times a month and I send my shirts out. They're happy with that, and I take a vacation. But at the end of the day, they've never looked at it like a business.
Where can people get in contact with you? If there's a business owner out there, a CEO, an executive, a founder that, needs help on any of this kind of stuff, what's the best way to get in contact?
I'm across all socials, Tad Nelson, and Tad Nelson Associates. The easiest way to ever get a hold of me is through email. It's really easy. tad@tadlaw.com. Piece of cake.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put everything down below. But Tad, this has been great. I had a really good conversation today with you, and really enjoyed some of these topics and revolving around the legality for different businesses and business owners, just generally, but also within Texas. Talked about AI a little bit. I thought that was really fascinating. Some really good tidbits in there about maybe how, it can be, a very interesting industry going forward, but also how it's helping you guys and how you guys are leveraging it and for different professions. So yeah, a lot of great stuff today. And we'd love to do this again sometime too. If you ever in Vegas, hit me up, come through. Maybe we can do an in-person interview.
Let me know when you go down there. Let me know when you get there. When are you planning on getting there?
I'll be moving there in September, and I will be there probably throughout most of the fall. I'll be going to Money 2020 in Vegas in October, and there's another event in Miami I'll be at for a couple of days in November. But for the most part, I'll be in Vegas. So if you're around, let me know.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. But take care in the meantime, and we'll be in touch, and looking forward to getting this episode out.
Yeah, thank you very much. But anyway, thanks a million.